Heiner. Can you hear me okay, Heiner? You are muted, so I will unmute you. Okay. Yeah, I unmuted you.
So you can hear me?
Can you say something so I can hear you?
So you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. There's two of you. There's always zwei Heiner. Eins, zwei. Doppelgänger?
My question.
There might be an echo if you actually have this thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
I have to mute here.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. You can hear me okay?
I do. Can you hear me?
Testing.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you quite well.
Perfect. I had to put the volume down on the other system. I
Yes.
still have problems with my provider. And when it's really getting bad, I have to go to the garden to have the public smartphone connection. What I wanted to know from you, did you find the original files of our Maker for Humanity exercise? Because
I think I have them, but I've not yet uploaded them yet. So I've got to do that today after this call. Echo, cancel. Yeah, I recognize that after yesterday I did not do the upload, so I'm gonna have to do that today. I'll send you a link as soon as I get the upload. So it'll be all the original files, and then you can copy them and edit them if you like. Okay.
Perfect. Joy, my captain, will be happy. I still have to do an errand, but it looks like we are stable. And I'll see you in a moment.
Okay. All right. See you soon, Heiner. Hello, Anna. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hiya.
How's your Sunday?
Been nice. They said it was going to rain, but it didn't, and we went for a lovely walk. What was that?
Taking my medications.
All right. What are they for?
High blood pressure and cholesterol, some vitamins, some C and D supplements, and yeah, I think that's it. Hey, Tammy.
Morning.
Hi, Tammy.
Hi. How's it going?
Good.
Great.
Oh, Heiner is on.
Heiner will be back in a couple of minutes. He just said hi. And I'll have to go do something.
How's Sunday going?
How come when we meet it's 6 o'clock and you're just getting up? And this is, well, 6 o'clock for me. 4 o'clock is 2 hours earlier. So that must be the middle of the night for you.
Oh, no, it's 8 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah, we meet at 10 because that's like later. It's 10 a.m. for me when we meet.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I get up pretty early, generally speaking.
Kara should be here shortly.
These light light mornings and light evenings. It's a very short night, isn't it? The longest day is coming up. Yeah.
Yes.
Soon, right? It'll be in about a week, less than a week.
And then it's downhill all the way.
No. I went. They have this huge garage sale on Commercial Drive in Vancouver, which is there's garage sales everywhere. So I went with my friend yesterday and went poking around.
Did you find anything?
Yes, I found, and there was tons of free piles as well. So
Oh wow, I love that.
yeah, this was in the free pile.
Okay.
This top was in the free pile.
Okay.
Hi, Heiner.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
How are you?
Greetings. I need some more people on deck.
Yes, you're the captain.
Yes.
Ahoy there.
My captain is. I had to take over
Someone's got to take over, Heiner.
I know.
Hi, Harry.
Hi. We have a double Heiner, as usual. Anna, Tammy, Sam. Sam is
Doug?
here.
Does anybody know if Doug's coming?
No, this is Doug game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
One Heiner has gone.
Yes. Heiner is rather unpredictable. You look great, Heiner. What's your identity today?
Pilot or captain.
Okay. So you'll be flying us around then.
Hello, Lucy.
Lucy is coming in. Welcome, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Sorry, a bit late again.
Not at all. We have a rather sort of fluffy beginning because people are coming in, so we don't really start until everybody's arrived.
Yes. You should do small talk now.
I should do small talk. Okay.
I'm going to go get myself a cup of tea.
I like that. Yes.
Like, tell us what the weather is in wherever you are, Sweden.
Yes, where are you from, Lucy?
I'm from Sussex, outside of London.
Ah, a Brit.
I've been living in Sweden the last 8 years, and before that in Switzerland. So the UK is a bit of a distant memory, a fond one, but distant. So where I am now, it's 5 in the evening, so it's been quite a warm day. I've been out, it was a friend's birthday, so I've been out at a cabin on the seaside. So I've taken a nice walk on a very rocky beach. That's about it today.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know who those people are?
Yeah, one way or another. I know a little about all of you, I think. Not much, but a little. At least know names and some maybe interest from things people write. Yeah.
And what brings you here, Lucy?
What brings me here? Well, I found out about you all a few months ago now, and joined a couple of things, and then I've been very, very busy with work and other discoveries, I guess. So it's always been in the back of my mind to join again. And you know how things work. You go towards what you need or want at the time when it's right. So
You hear that, Sam?
Yeah.
Great,
I
thanks.
guess I'm curious about the history of all of you, how you've known each other, and what's motivated all that you've done, all the conversations you've had. And for me, is also an opportunity to connect with people who maybe share some understandings of things and have different ideas that I can learn from or contribute to. And it's something that over time I found I really need, and it's not so easy to always find.
Well, you're at the right spot if it's about different ideas. A lot of different ideas here.
Yeah, and it seems like there's some of you have interests in quite maybe more social questions, or human questions, and others environmental and sustainability, and that for me is really interesting to have all of those thrown in the pot together.
Okay. So what can we tell you? Anna.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to add that there are also a lot of people who are into designing programs and software, and that's quite a large part of what goes on. It's not something that I'm involved in because I don't know anything about that, but I'm more the social human side. So we started coming together because there was a competition to design a global governance system that would address the current threats to humanity. And that was last year, and the entry had to be in by September. So most of us were sort of, I came in right at the last minute. Tammy was there right at the beginning of that, and maybe Sam as well, I think, and Harry, I don't know, they'll tell you.
I don't know either.
Daniel as well, Anna's son.
Yeah, that's how I heard about it, through my son, who was helping to start it off, but then he went off and did something else. And we agreed that we wanted to keep meeting, even though we already gave in the entry. And since then, yeah, I think, Tammy, you should take up the story, because they have a particular, these meetings, these conversations have a particular significance, I think, particularly to Tammy. So do you want to take it up?
So one of the things that I brought was press record. What happens when we show up in presence and really discuss things deeply and record that, so that we can reflect and really see what we're saying. For me, the heart of what I am excited about and what this is for me is it's like living a live life, I suppose. It's like when we go deeply into what we really think and feel and cross our understanding, that there's an underlying truth, I suppose, or a constellation of ideas that sit together, that need to be seen and understood together. And I notice I'm not very articulate at the moment, but the point is to articulate what we think and feel, so that we can come together as humans and really understand what is going on, what the blocks are, and how we can transform through unblocking that. And originally, when Daniel, William, and I were talking, it was about you know, what are the technological tools that we need for interoperability to work together? And then, but also, and with the same weight, what are the how do we work together as human beings? And so that's very complex, obviously. And I feel like there's an emergent story that comes from us coming together that I think is important to capture and share and kind of understand and make visible for others. So a part of, you know, we've been a bit weaving and wild and woolly in a way. We've been kind of just going with the flow. I would love to see more like clearly bounded somehow conversations as a starting point, and really drawing people in to get more specific. A little less woolly would be amazing, I think, to progress. And yet, you know, there's something that we're learning about emergence that happens in presence with each other that needs to actually have that freedom and space to be there. So I feel like I know I'm feeling my way forward in this. And I think as a group, we're also feeling our way forward in how we are together, how we focus our attention, how we invite people in, and how we describe what we're doing. All of that is still quite emergent, I would say, but getting more clear, and we're finding our way. And
can I just add?
Yeah.
Something? Because I think it's important to say that in the entry that we made, collaboration really was the key that we were offering. And that's what we feel we're doing here. We're exploring collaboration. So we're trying to discover, you know, this is some sort of a solution to the world's ills, just us talking together.
Yes, Doug, who's not present here, talks always about doing and being and doing myself differently or something like that. But for me, the distinction is that we know how we got here. We're trying to understand that, and we know we have to invent or develop different ways of behavior. And we can connect globally, but really don't really know how to connect very well between people. Most of us have kind of not so great relationship with the next door neighbors. So I think we're very primitive at that level, and we need to kind of learn, and that's what I'm practicing here, to be present with who I am now, and dare to kind of expose myself without getting into discussions with what's right or wrong, but kind of share who I am, what my ideas are, what my feelings are, how I approach stuff, and offering this is my gift to the group in order to be able to find ways that we can do stuff together. And then we find these are all very smart people around you, and they all bring so much, it's honest, and then they bring so much content, and they all bring it into the conversation that I mostly immediately drown in all the options and ideas and stuff, and there's so much there, and everybody has his own language, the way of framing and pointing at stuff, own purposes, priorities, ambitions. So it's a huge message sometimes, and that makes it very woolly and wide-ranging as well. But the intent and the felt intention and the pain from the world as it is, and the desire to make it a better place, that's quite clear as the point on the horizon that we try to navigate towards. But as it's we must do stuff different. So we must know what should be different, what should we let go of, and what kind of tools from the past are still very useful today. And I haven't figured that out yet. but maybe somebody else can say more about this. Like Heiner is also a walking encyclopedia.
Well, maybe I add my view. I met Fleming about 40, maybe even 50 years ago. We were with 10 conversation experiments. Is there a problem with audio? I have to switch to another system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Heiner, before the hour started, your audio was quite good. So I was wondering what happened.
I had something else on.
Anyway, while Heiner is fixing his audio, I'll add another flavor to this, and that is we all have these visions of the ills that befall us. And then we all have these visions of a better world or society or civilization that we all want to co-create together. And I think we are here to try and bridge that. You know, we can't ignore the fact that we're already living in a system that's breaking down. We can't assume that the new world is already here. So that bridging, I think, is a large part of what we're actually trying to do. And it's learning how to understand each other, how to appreciate each other, listen, you know, get these ideas shared, support each other, and sort of be the light at the end of the tunnel for each of us. So I think that's the challenge, you know, whether it's sociological, whether it's humanistic, whether it's technological, whether it's ethical, political, whatever. That's the bridge, I think, that we're all trying to co-create. And that's why there's a diverse set of interests and skill sets that I think is very interesting to navigate, and that adds to the apparently unorganized nature of these conversations, but it's also what gives it richness. So the fact that we've got, what, Tammy, how many do we have now? 150 or so odd videos that we've created, I think none of which are less than an hour and a half, or maybe, you know, some of them go on for 3 or 4 hours. These are just ways for us to sort of do that exploration and navigation, while each of us still does what we can in our own local, you know, area of the universe. Anyway, that's my couple of specks of pepper and salt to add to this conversation.
Thank you, Sam. I had to switch to another system. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Very good. Yeah.
You see, I have problems with the bandwidth, and so I went again on my mobile phone bandwidth. What I was about to say was, since 40, maybe even 50 years, I know Fleming, and I went with his New Civilization Network into all this experience, not all, only few of them, of the ones from Fleming. And I really appreciated this conversation experiments. And when we were with the Foundations 20, around the G20, this new call was coming up to harvest new ideas to solve the mess. I looked very carefully what was going in, who joined the group, and that we were very much technology driven. Besides Sam and me, Tammy very aptly looked into all this technological and database and communication challenges, but then there were a lot of people who had a solution, a technical solution, to solve the problematic, the mess. And what is happening now, I'm looking from outside, is that we are a very interesting bunch of people from all cultures, different aptitudes, different estimations and assumptions and expectations. And we are coming back to this original drive to look into ourselves, to listen, to build community, to build even family. And this is very, very nice. So I learned a lot from Anna, but especially we somehow have lost the grand challenge this foundation's exercise and competition was putting onto us, because the foundation is still there. what has been done with this competition is what I observe very often. People harvest some great ideas, and nice people like Tammy and Sam are investing a hell of a lot of work, and it's all lost in vaporware. If not, people like us somehow try to confront and learn from and digest and harvest what are the real big challenges. That it's not that it is difficult to make friends with my neighbor or discuss the boundaries between me and my neighbor, but how do we do it in this intercultural, cross-scales, cross-discipline problematique we are facing. I'm trying to work on a solutionatic through expanded spaces, because in reality we have to negotiate and overlap. But I think this has been too much already. I was quite deep into my subjects. I was very curious to find out what Lucy has been doing, why she, like me, was in environment and came back like me to education, to young children, in her case. More
Heiner, you're on. Wow.
doing here too, but
Okay, so did anybody
You want
understand
to
the last
pick it up,
20
Lucy?
seconds of Heiner?
I think I got the question, so maybe I can do it my best job. Yeah, so where's the best place to start? As a young kid, I was always outdoors a lot. So time outside and animals and things were my big passion. So that led to studying biology and a master's in environmental technology. Then I started traveling and I saw what was going on. I started traveling, I started reading. I saw what was going on in more tropical countries and got quite fascinated by that. So I did a PhD in tropical forest management, and I went off to a part of India and with this very scientific idea, and I was confronted with the reality in this wildlife sanctuary I was working in, that this problem wasn't biological, it wasn't a knowledge problem, it was all really about, values and people. Most forest areas in India either have or have had, large indigenous population. And so I saw the reality of what was described as a conservation problem really as a people problem. And also did a lot of work with traditional indigenous knowledge. So that kind of broadened my perspective about what is knowledge, what is truth, who decides, and what power you have, how much that influences how much your knowledge kind of gets a space at the table. So I carried on in research for a while. I stayed with tropical forestry, and then I worked on oil palm in Indonesia and a few other different things. Also keeping up with this theme of indigenous knowledge. And then I worked more with like conceptual ideas in environmental science and conservation. So the idea of resilience, ecological resilience, and over time just got really fed up with this whole process of there's so much knowledge that's being produced and written in books, and it sits on a shelf, and maybe someone else who writes books reads what you've written, or it just sits on a shelf. And it occurred to me that there's not a huge amount of science that we actually really lack knowledge. It's more we have knowledge and we've had it for quite a long time. And many of these things are quite common sense if you're connected to the world around you. So that was one part of getting a bit disheartened. And the other part was being part of the academic environment and seeing how badly treated people are. The only thing that counts is how much funding you get, how many papers are published. And the whole system is really damaging people. And I didn't really want to be part of all of that. So at the same time, I made a really good friend here when I moved to Sweden who was really interested in teaching girls ice hockey. And I'd been teaching girls weightlifting, and had been a bit frustrated that there were so few that would, girls just didn't think it was something for them. But when they had the chance to try it, they thought, this is amazing. So Jenny, this friend of mine, and I decided to start a charity that worked with girls' sport, using sport as a tool for development. So how can you learn leadership skills or learn to overcome fears, and even just things like what's a feeling or what's an emotion? Where is that in the body, and how does that knowledge help me? So we started with girls' sport, and then we branched out a bit more towards using sport as a tool for social change generally. So we did quite a bit of work with women's leadership, or I never know, feminine leadership, a different style of leadership. It's not necessarily women, far from it, in fact. But so we've done some work with that. We have a swimming school for deaf children, where we try and challenge norms in leadership. So the people who are teaching deaf children are young deaf women who are, developing their leadership skills. And then we do a lot of meeting places. Like we organise a festival every year because we think bringing people together and talking is really important. So now I've kind of found my thing, partly, and it's not really even so much about sport necessarily, but it's how's the best way of, I guess I use my work as a bit of a playground to what do I know to be true about the problems we have in the world, and what are my edges of development, and how can I put all those pieces together, and how do I do that work? How do I meet people? How do I try and work with the employees that we have? And so, yeah, I mean, it feels like for me, this whole piece that we were talking about, Anna and Tammy, last time we spoke about the body and how much we're disconnected from our bodies generally, and what role that has to play in the mess that we've made for ourselves. For me, it's like a very, very big part of how we solve all of these problems. I've seen it in practice. I've seen how people shift when they just have some of those experiences of their own body, or even just connection with other human beings. For me, feels like people are so fearful of being seen or seeing others, and so I try and kind of work a bit with those ideas a little bit when there's a chance. I often it's a little bit by stealth, that Doug and I talked about once. We talked once on our own about how you kind of have to put yourself in disguise and go in and do something, and you tell one story to those you're trying to work with, but secretly you have another agenda inside, which I felt a little bit guilty about, but he gave me a bit of encouragement. That was totally fine to be doing that. So I think that's where I am now. And I think there's lots of chances to connect these things with environmental questions, with technology is something that's not an area that's very familiar for me, but I see that there's a lot of power there. And then I think to come up with this kind of solutions that we really need, it's valuable to have an appreciation for where those parts fit in. Does that clear up?
I'd like to pick up just on one thing you said, which sort of connects with what's an edge for me, which we've been writing about on Facebook, about female-male qualities, because you said something about leadership and then feminine leadership. Somehow that was different, and it doesn't just apply to women, but it signifies something to call it feminine leadership.
Yeah.
And so what I'm questioning really is using that we have grown into using that sort of nomenclature because it fits for us. We know what we mean when we talk about feminine leadership as opposed to masculine leadership. But it does tie it to gender using those words. So I'm wondering whether we can try and think of, you know, what it is that we want to do, but really be careful not to use these gender specific words which reinforce the connection of particular qualities to a particular gender, which we know is not true, because we constantly say, of course, these qualities are both in men and women women have both masculine and feminine. You know, we try and fuzzy the whole thing. Actually, it would be much better if we really didn't call them feminine qualities and male qualities. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I found the questions that you've asked, Anna, even in I think that it came up once before in an earlier conversation I joined, and I had to really think about your point to try and keep going back, like what are the layers of, you know, that we're taught these terms, and you remove one set of terms and then you land somewhere else and then you remove that one, and then I got a bit stuck, like, okay, but there is feminine, there is masculine, and that's not male and female. And then I had, okay, wait a minute. You know, so I think I'm curious to understand more about what it is that you see, because I can feel that there's something there and I'm not quite there yet.
Well, I think it would be interesting to hear when you say, well, there is something there. Something is feminine and something is masculine. If you want to think about that out loud, you know, what is that for you?
I think a lot of my ideas come from things I've read, conversations I've had about feminine energy and masculine energy from maybe more like the spiritual community. And that's made sense to me in terms of what's inside me, what have I encountered in other people, what I understand about our kind of physical universe, nature.
Can you expand on that? What are those things?
Also things like if I've seen, you know, there's these two boxes in my head, and then there's the things I guess I put in there, but feminine in terms of like connection, diversity in thinking, not to be, you know, not to just have a very linear way of thinking, and sometimes destruction, sometimes creation. Yeah, and then the masculine side, I guess, a bit more, linear ways of thinking, hierarchies, more, I mean, in terms of the feminine leadership part, much more like I have to show up with all the answers and tell everyone else, rather than my role is to hold a space where everyone has an answer that we can learn from. But at some point I've learned that these set of characteristics we call feminine and these set of characteristics we call masculine, as independent of male or female. And I had to look at the question where it come from, and why, as you said, why do we need that? And I haven't really got any further. I find it a little bit uncomfortable almost to let it go, because I think there's been layers of, certainly when I was younger, of understanding all of this, you know, what's male and female, and then getting rid of male and female, what's masculine and feminine. And I felt I'd landed in a place where I was like, okay, this feels kind of good. I can understand the world with this framework. So it's not entirely comfortable to feel like maybe I have to let that go. Especially doing some of the work that I do where we talk a lot about gender. And even to use the word feminine and masculine is difficult for some people. So that just brings up practical challenges of communicating my understanding. Now I'm really curious. I'm curious to learn more about your thinking and how you've got there. Like, at what point did you realize all of these layers were just, like, there was something underneath that needed to be, something more fundamental that needed to be looked at?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think I've been a lot in the sort of place that you're describing about, having got to a place where you feel that you've really begun to understand, because men are different from women, aren't they? We've got to somehow identify what that difference is. And then feeling somehow you get to a place where you really do understand. I think part of it was, for me, that when I was young, I wanted to be a boy. When I was 8 or 9, I can remember I don't remember much about it, but I remember an incident when I was about 7 or 8 and I was just wearing a pair of knickers. It was very hot. And somebody rang at the door, and it was the postman, and he gave me some letters and he said, "Here you are, Sonny." And I was on top of the world because he'd called me Sonny. So I just know from that there was something about being a boy that felt really good. I don't remember much else about that. So that was there. And, what is now called gender dysphoria, which I've just been looking up, there is such a lot of questioning now about people self-identifying what their gender is. And I just put something up on Facebook about the Labour Party accepting that people who self-identify as women, and no other conditions, they don't have to dress as women or appear as women, as long as they self-identify as a woman, they can stand for a woman's position in the Labour Party, which is a huge step to take. And of course, it hasn't happened without controversy. There is a lot of discussion about it. And yeah, I can't say when or how I got to this point, but it's just getting clearer and clearer that this is something that needs to happen for us to free ourselves from this sort of prison that we've been in about what is a man and what is a woman. We don't necessarily feel it as a prison. For some people, and it also depends on what age you are. As a teenager, probably you just love all the makeup and the high heels and, all the attention. And I think it's easier to see as you get older. As you're not trying necessarily to attract a mate. There's a lot of, I think a lot goes into having to identify with one or other if you're trying to attract a mate. So I don't know. For me, it's a lot of question marks at the moment. I certainly haven't reached, a point where I feel really clear, but I would love to talk about it more because it just feels there's a lot there.
I'd like to think aloud a little bit about gender, and I don't know when I started to realize, but I'm somewhere on the gender spectrum. I don't fully, obviously there's my physicality. I was born a woman, but I also feel that a lot of times I'm operating inside in terms of energy as I call it my inner dude. And, lately I've been even, there's parts of how I appear in the world, you know, for years I wore kind of, I mean, it's obviously female, I'm female, but, you know, wearing clothes that were more male, but also how I communicate. And what's interesting is that a lot of times, especially when I'm working or expressing, you know, technological work or like the visionary work that I have, the alphabet code, all of those things are very, for me, they feel male. And so when I write about it, when I speak about it, there's a specificity, which is where I would say that's my maleness, is when I become when it's about naming things and being really specific about what I'm talking about. That is really quite male for me. And then the feminine aspects are more in the holding space, in the deep listening, in kind of that spaces in between where I'm sensing. So for me, yeah, the sensing aspects for me feel feminine, and the articulation aspects of me are more male. And I've noticed over the years that whether it's writing or whether it's speaking, when I'm carrying that male energy, that a lot of people can't take it in. People kind of can bounce off that, and I don't know really what's going on for the other people, but I've wondered about it in terms of like how integrated my inner poles are, and if yeah, I don't really know how to speak to that, but it feels like that others sometimes aren't able to receive me when I'm in that strong male energy where I'm being very specific. Yeah.
Yeah, I would really like to try to transcribe that into qualities rather than call it strong male energy.
I like that. I'm actually with you, Anna. Every time I hear male, feminine, masculine, feminine, his, her, there's an othering that takes place. Like, I am this, that is the other. And that doesn't feel integral to me. It doesn't feel like there's a recognition of the wholeness that this particular group, in fact, attempts to achieve. So the use of that language seems to draw a divide that we're saying we don't want to see anymore, and yet we still use that language. So I'm with you. I prefer to see more integral discussion of these characteristics and say they're human in some way rather than male, female.
I realise I also have a fear of that we might lose something. I feel like if I take for given that I believe, you know, masculine and feminine sets of qualities that can be found in different combinations in people, but that we've never really understood that, and we've had a very damaging relationship between the masculine and the feminine. I'm worried that we throw these things out without ever having taken the time to appreciate that there's something very special when we fully understand what those two things are and how they meet and complement each other. And I struggle to separate what is an internal like knowing of some kind for me, or what is something that I've taken on because of ideas I've liked that I've read, or that it feels like a safe understanding to have. But I think there's something maybe to be gained by asking those questions. Are we too hasty to throw those things away because we have such a negative history with them? When there could be an alternative that was much more positive, we might feel less, it might not be such a pressing kind of issue.
Can you talk about what you feel we're throwing away, specifically that?
I think it's probably even quite personal, of a journey of understanding myself and I can also have moments of, especially with work and being in an academic career and achieving things, of having quite a masculine energy and having received quite a lot of judgment and criticism of that. In different ways, certain types from women and certain types from men. And then I think later on, I've found some relief in understanding this idea of masculine and feminine, of understanding that this isn't me as a person necessarily, but that this is a certain quality and that there are other qualities, and seeing myself in wider society and maybe understanding, well, other people are maybe not there yet, you know, in terms of an appreciation of a masculine energy doesn't, or that I have a masculine energy doesn't mean that there's also not feminine energy there. It's just not what I'm going to bring when I show up to a work meeting, for example. So I think I found like a bit of self-understanding and self-acceptance with those two terms of like, I can be both. And I really understand the benefits of both of them when they're useful and what they bring to my life and what they can bring to others. And a greater appreciation for others maybe also, to see that same, you know, it can be both at different times, neither is right or wrong. Or
So I also don't advocate throwing away, but I advocate more recognition that there is a spectrum. You know, it's a simple thing to say, oh, I'm bringing masculine energy. It's probably more discerning to say, I'm bringing a clarity, I'm bringing a assertiveness, I'm bringing a resoluteness, I'm bringing a irritability, I'm bringing a prescriptive behavior, you know, so that can give a more detailed understanding of an approach. Whereas I could use other similar words to say, I'm using a more heart-centered, I'm using a more listening basis, I'm using a more connection basis. And I don't necessarily have to use the word feminine in that context, because to do so, to me, implies very strongly that men can't do that. And that's the othering that I'm hoping we can get away with. I mean, that we can do away with.
Yes, those are easy labels that contain, these are huge containers for all kinds of qualities that might occur more statistically in men and women, but those qualities in themselves are the distinctions. So I like what you bring here. And do we need another label for this huge box where we throw all these qualities in order to do that? I don't know. It's like a category of femininity and all that. We might
I feel the same thing about other labels. LGBTQ, blah, 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 blah. You know, those are still labels. You know, why do it that way? If we're really interested in the whole spectrum, the whole fullness of human experience.
Mm. Sorry, Heiner, you carry on.
I learned form follows function. And I've seen very wise women ruling all North American Indian tribes. So they have functions, and their functions is to care for the bigger picture, for the next season, for being in charge and putting chieftains on the spot, giving them a mission. And I have seen it with my children in the early 3, 4, 5 years. My daughter and my son were the same. But then we start to educate them in kindergarten and school, and they come to certain properties you might call male or female. But I think the quality is to see how you are included in life, what is your scope, your position, your perspectives, what are the frames, and that is my concerns. And getting lost in this discussion, is it more female or male? I think we are a spectrum, and we are put in certain places to achieve certain things, and then we are sometimes, how do you say, with golden clubs somewhere in a prison. But we are, I think, basically as humans there to serve, and the boys do it the same ways like the girls. But the older they are in our society, there is not this really being involved with taking on responsibility. So when we did with Dan and Perry and the Earth Stewards, this dialogues which were always split, that the boys were sitting in the cycles and the girls, their attitude were totally different in going earnestly in discussions with the women and playing football and drinking whatever, was more the role the boys were doing, because they have not been educated to sincerely talk to each other. So I think this is different in the very early ages, and putting it into boxes of male or female is part of the problem, not part of the solution.
I think that's what we're saying, Heiner, exactly what you said. That's right. And going back to Lucy, you were saying, I can't remember now exactly what it was, but I had a feeling, this feeling that you've managed to see male and female inside yourself, or masculine and feminine inside yourself, and that feels comfortable somehow to identify them as masculine and feminine rather than qualities. And I'm wondering whether that might be, sorry?
No, I just unclicked my mute button.
I'm wondering whether that could be something to do with mother-father, a sort of loyalty to mother-father, a sort of, a connection to a feeling of internal.
I think it's so entrenched, male, female, from such a young age that it's actually really hard to even reflect on a lot of these parts without being influenced by all of that. And I think there may be a difference in being a woman. I'm curious if there's a difference in being a woman and looking at this question versus being a man and looking at this question. When Sam said, for example, like showing up for a meeting and saying, okay, I'm being direct, or I'm being, whatever these qualities might be, that is received in a different way in our culture. If I'm a man and I show up in the room and say those things, I'm going to get one reaction. If I'm a woman and show up in the room and say those things, I'm going to get totally another. So I think there's a safety in being a woman in our current society and using these terms, because you kind of have an excuse for being able to express a certain part of yourself or be a certain way that is still not really acceptable to most people. So I think there's, for me, rather than a loyalty, there's a feeling of safety associated with it. I think that's probably...
Yeah, that's really interesting. That sounds like, if I was being, what are the terms that Sam used? If I was being direct and assertive and resolute, then somehow I would have to take responsibility for that myself, because they are just qualities. But if I'm saying, well, I'm expressing my masculine side, it sort of feels like I have support from a sort of universality.
Something like that.
Yeah, because everybody has a masculine side.
Yeah. Yeah, and that there are judgments associated with being a woman and showing up in a room and saying, okay, now you're going to get my assertive side, or, you know, there's other associations that come with that,
Yeah,
that a man wouldn't receive.
it's just being bossy.
Or like,
Yeah.
oh God, this meeting's going to be a nightmare. What's,
Yes.
you know? So
Yeah.
I think it's like when you're trying to navigate in the world and be effective with things, or, you know, have a good impact, then there's an awareness of how that is all received that you get so used to over time that it then makes this quite hard to, you know, I was thinking, like, what would the world be like if we didn't have male, female, masculine, feminine, if we didn't talk in those terms? How, oh, it's very interesting to imagine.
Do you have any ideas what it might feel like?
I think a lot of people would find it very uncomfortable for a while. No, I think we'd focus much more on people as individuals, I think, not putting them in boxes. We'd pay attention much more. Because I think it's like a quick label, isn't it? Man, woman. We kind of make a whole bunch of other associations with that. We'd have to pay a bit more attention to who somebody was.
Yeah. I mean, try it this way. Call me an Asian. What does that connote? What does that bring up? I am Asian. I am male. But just call me that. Immediately, a bunch of connotations and implications appear in those people. And then those occupy your consciousness as opposed to really getting to know me.
So in this book called Radical Wholeness by this guy, Philip Shepherd, which we were talking about last time, he talks about a hunter-gatherer tribe, a group called the Piraha. And their language has no words for time, no past, no future, no, I mean, that's even worse, that not having male and female. Can you imagine not having sort of the 24-hour clock and, you know, when you're supposed to be somewhere and all of that? They just don't have any numbers in their vocabulary. And they're, some people have tried to learn their language, and one person that is quoted in the book as saying, I just had to feel it, because it's to do with presence. They talk about things completely in the present or within the last 2 generations. They don't have any history that they hold on to. It's all about the present. And the way that they talk is talking about their relationship to whatever it is in the present or within the last 2 generations. Why am I saying, sorry, who said what? Was that me? I'm just wondering why I'm bringing this up, because it just shows what a narrow, or no, that's not, I mean, to us, what they're doing seems to be very narrow, because they don't have words for objects. Well, we can objectify things, and we can say Asian male, and we have already a load of associations with that. But they would say something which was a direct relation to who you are now, rather than some concept of what you might appear to be. And I'm just feeling that if we could add that to our vocabulary, I think, you know, if it would enhance what we were talking about earlier, which was being more connected to the body, to nature, to the cosmos, to just feeling generally connected and related to everything.
You know, I haven't read that book, but the first question I would ask is, do they worry about food for next year?
Do they worry about
Food.
food?
Yes. In other words, you know, if you don't have a concern, then those ideas don't impinge on your consciousness. Much of humanity has had to evolve ideas in order to work together for certain needs. And if some tribe or some village had to worry about enough grain for the following year, or the following 2 years, or the following 5 generations, then it seems to me the concept of succession or time or sequencing would naturally arise. These concepts are not good or bad in and of themselves. They're all useful when applied. And it seems that if they really truly do not have a notion of time, they may not be in need of planning. Over.
I think that's probably right. And I think it's probably true that our words and their meanings arose because of scarcity. And you could say that the meaning of man, woman, or male, female, definitely masculine, feminine, arose because of the structure of our relationships. When a woman had no rights of her own, she and her children belonged to the man. And, you know, the whole, the interpretation of yin yang, yin being dark, negative female, and yang, this is what I just looked up, yang being brightness, positive, and male. Isn't that awful?
No, I really don't resonate with those definitions at all. In fact, and this may not be the common, but for me, yin refers to reception of energy, and yang refers to projection of energy. It's a very simple concept, but those can be misinterpreted, I think, in a number of ways.
But yin is also supposed to be female, isn't it? And yang male?
It doesn't have to be. It's any duality that you choose to put into interpretation.
Yeah, but that's a sort of a proper common sense way of looking at it. But in fact, if you Google yin yang, that's what I got. And it is a lot interpreted in that way, that women are sort of meek and docile and dark.
Maybe mostly, but you know, there's still matriarchal societies, especially in southern China, where men take care of things in the home and women do business and negotiate with foreigners, you know, and it's still the case. I think that in the bridging that I think I referred to in the early part of the conversation, if we are the bridging of old versus new, then I think we get to choose how we use these notions differently. And it's okay to recognize that the past usage of terms like male, female, masculine, feminine, yin, yang, whatever, served a purpose. It's okay to do that, I think. To not do that is to be stupid, you know, and to just throw away something that had some utility. But we get to choose what they then can mean in this new society that we want, and choose new terms and new ways of adding connotation to those old words. And I think that's always an interesting dynamic in these conversations, is how much we're still stuck in the past versus how much we recognize the transition, versus how much we're stuck in the future and don't recognize the past. That, I think, is an interesting aspect of looking at these conversations.
Well, I think it's also how difficult it is, as Lucy was saying, to let go of terms that we have been brought up with that pervade our whole system.
And it's great to have that choice, isn't it? To be aware
Yeah.
and to make that choice. Or not.
It's also really interesting, Anna, your comment about time and the African tribe who doesn't consider that, because it helps us to be like, okay, well, what are the bounds that we're using to perceive through? You know, like if we have a different relationship with time, that's a completely different fundamental piece that informs what we think and how we think. And I'm really curious in terms of, because it's identity and the boundaries around what we understand is part of what we're pushing against through beyond. And so I think it's interesting to look at those boundaries, like what is at that edge, and what is the transforming meaning. And then there's these binaries, right? But there's always more than just that binary, you know. And I think when we talk about that anything that's binary, it resolution of that binary needs to be seen as well. There's that third. And yeah, and it's you know, these deeply held beliefs that we have, you know, we become attached to them and they inform our own identity. So there's this changing space that we're all in, I feel, that I'm definitely in, that where what does it mean if I don't hold on to those beliefs? You know, who am I then?
This morning I was reading something by this guy, can't remember his first name, Maturana Romensin. I think he coined the term autopoiesis. And he was talking about that we have this idea, this concept, that there is something out there called reality. And his idea is that actually all we know is our own experience. And this idea of reality is constructed from experiences that we have. And we treat it as though we know it's there and don't realize that it's just based on our experiences. So there's another concept that can get blown if you really take that in and realize that your experience is what determines how you see reality, or what you see reality to be, rather than reality determining your experience, which is how we usually see things, because we've made a reality, put it out there, and then we say it influences us. Anyway, that's his idea. I'm sure that there are lots of ways of counteracting that. It appealed to me. I like the idea. Yeah, Heiner.
Anna?
Yeah.
I think the first time we met in video conferencing, we clashed. because I spoke and you said you don't have speaking time. And then it made sense. But what I want to tell you, I think we should sometimes pause and reflect, and then maybe single who should speak next or have a moderator, because I feel if we just flesh out, oh, I know something, we are losing a lot of energy. I just want to tell you that we invited Umberto Maturana and Francisco Varela in the early 90s to Berlin. He's a good friend. I can show you many pictures. So I fully resonate with what you said and what you might have read in some books. What I want to show you, it is not this mental boundary of time, or time being considered in Eastern traditions like a spiral, so you can downscale and upscale, but that we in our discussions those days said there's even a more basic fundamental flaw. It is about the conception of space or space-time. And space is something like so incredibly stuck in our Western culture that it was even by the early philosophers an a priori. You cannot name it, you cannot discuss it. So I think all this is very interesting. What I heard, I switched off because I'm having some people coming and I have to leave now. But I really wanted to tell you, I think we have to come in our discussions in a more deeper reflections. What are the basic concepts? Because they are so different. And maybe the last thing, when we did Africa Beyond Poverty, the conference leader with Bishop Tutu and Ganda Society, he wrote the books on African sagacious knowledge. You see, all these words I didn't know about in the early 90s. This is what I would really like to share, because we are reinventing wheels here and so much is known in different hats. I think it's a real great chance that we are here together. And excuse me for bumping in. I had a little aggression about you because you were talking so much and immediately that nobody could jump in. But this is just only a personal, maybe male feeling. But in a nutshell, I think we are a great team here.
I was noticing that Lucy, Anna, and I have had more airtime in this conversation than Harry, Heiner, and Sam, and that's interesting.
We're here.
And Harry hardly said anything, so it would be lovely to hear from you.
Blah, blah, blah. What do you want to hear, Anna?
Well, what's going on for you at this moment?
Well, I'm listening. I'm kind of trying to absorb. I'm trying to grasp it. And of course, we have all those dichotomies, you call them in English, and all these binaries. And we, of course, need distinction in order to navigate the world. Without the distinction of the left and right, I would be lost and going forward and backwards. So we are distinct. We're choosing all the time. And when I notice somebody in the street, I immediately know whether it's, to me, it's a woman or a man. It happens automatically. So they're probably, from an evolutionary standpoint, very useful. And I also do agree that we need to rise above the simplicity of this thinking in order to progress. This, for me, is mainly about language, because the differences are there, have always been there in this, what we call reality. Of course, you can step out of sight of it, but it doesn't help me inside this box. And I need to kind of, I'm wanting to find a way forward. There's another distinction to make this world a place that's not as volatile and as disruptive as it is in this moment. And I'm very much like that the women did not get more airspace, they took it. With that, I'm complete for the moment. I could have taken it as well, just I listened. Thank you.
And it's interesting that we got criticized for it, or at least I got criticized for it.
I didn't think you did not get criticized for taking airtime, Anna. I think Heiner, he's left, so I cannot speak for him, but he referred to something what happened somewhere else before. I don't know about that. I didn't feel it that way.
Would it be appropriate to say that the men were holding space for the women?
Were what? Sorry, Sam, I didn't get.
That Heiner, Harry, and I were holding space for Lucy, Tammy, and Anna. Would that be appropriate?
For me, it would be an appropriate description of what I've tried to do.
And is that human or is that feminine?
It's great.
You know, this whole male-female thing, there are so many innuendos in it. It's not straightforward. There, you know, the whole sort of feeling of being one up, one down, or, you know, it's a never-ending jiggle, yeah.
And I, as far as I grasp it, I think that's for a reason as well. It was like somewhere around the 60s or the 70s that I read a book about body language and about people go about with their body language in different cultures. Like an example was they observed a two-street speed. What's the word?
Intersection.
An intersection, two streets. So then people cross each other, and then do you notice, like in the Latin American world, people touch each other all the time. There's no real significance, and in the UK, people don't touch each other ever. So there's the language is different, but also it's in what men and women do with each other. We always have those games, and we need those games because if it's only as there's just one meaning or one definition, we can't play the game. So, oh, I was just talking to you, and without really revealing that I'm extremely interested in you. So we need all those vagueness in order to be able to use that space to kind of align where we want to be. So we didn't invent it, we didn't decide it. It just came about as a result of evolution. And I think it would be stupid to try to change the principles that has formed us. But I do think that we need to kind of be conscious of what we are doing, and that's what we are doing. Yes, there is black and there is white. There is an extreme pole that we could call male and the other feminine. It does exist, and I wouldn't want to miss it. And on the other hand, yes, there's a whole dimension in between. And if we can put another dimension on top of it and make it a plane, then yeah, there are also an immense amount of colors behind that kind of start to reveal themselves in this day and age. Because when I was young, these distinctions did not exist. These discussions did not exist. So it's all new. And I'm kind of feeling around what language would fit, because words are powerful tools. They can be, once I put a label on it, then you remember the label, and then I pull the label and we know what we're talking about. So it's all there for a reason. And we want to improve on that. Well, I'm happy to hear your thoughts about it, since you've put it on the table. I love smart women, but also that's a label.
It has a very different tone from saying smart men. doesn't it?
They came across.
For you, it has. And yes, there has been research that if you call a woman blonde, you brain prime her, then she has worse results of the test afterwards, and other sorts of brain prime work the same. So we have all those cliches, and they work perfectly, of course. But that's the discussion here. Yes, they exist. Yes, they're unavoidable unless we become conscious and come up with a better plan. And the better quality of the distinction and use of language is what, for me, is very important. And I don't have any yet, personally. I'm sorry.
So what's coming up for me right now is inclusion and integration to the limit of political correctness. You know? I think
shit.
Okay, yes.
Can you expand on that? I didn't really understand.
I think that, you know, some comments that have been made here about personal choices around gender roles and whatever, as long as they're quote unquote based in, okay, we're going to get deep into mud here, but there's got to be a basis for it, a basis in choice, a basis in reality, a basis in biology, a basis in psychology and everything, okay? But if we choose to ignore what's true, we choose to ignore our origins or our biological structures or our psychological structures, and we just say, oh, people are just people, let's just not make any distinctions between male and female, that's political correctness, and that's being stupid, in my view. And I hate when we have political correctness that actually takes away from real insight, from real discernment.
Okay, can you say why that's stupid?
Yeah, because it ignores what's actually true. When you ignore truth, and I know there's this very loaded word called truth, but when you ignore truth, you limit yourself, you limit others in understanding and intuition and possibilities and action, yes.
You're saying that there is some way that men and women are different, and that we need to recognize that.
Yes, they are.
Other than their biology.
Yes, and this is a dangerous thing to say. There's you know, psychological differences, there's neuronal structure differences, you know, that might actually be useful to understand. And to just assume that men and women are identical, I think is dangerous and stupid.
I don't think I'm wanting to assume, but I'm wanting to explore people's ideas of how they think men and women are different. So I think it'd be really good if you could talk about how you feel men and women are different.
Okay, I'll talk about my very, very, very personal experiences, having raised one son and two girls. This is not intended to be true for everyone. I'm just giving you 2 data points for myself. The effort I had to expend in order to connect with my son and to give him happiness was probably an order of magnitude, if not 2 orders of magnitude less than the effort it took to give my daughters an understanding and some kind of happiness. Now, this could be because I'm a guy myself, okay? So maybe he and I have that kind of connection. But I'm just talking yet again in just my own personal discussion. And it's a very curious conversation to have. Because, number one, even if I say it's 1 data point or 2 data points, it's too easy for others to extrapolate. It's too easy for me to extrapolate, just based on these 2 data points. I used to give my kids an allowance. They would get 2 stars, you know, if they did 4 things every evening. You know, if they put on their pajamas, brushed their teeth, did their homework, and went to bed on time, they would get 2 stars. And after a while, these stars would accumulate, and you know, I would divide the number of stars by 2, and they could actually cash it in for some kind of reward, or they could actually cash it in for time with me or places or trips, you know, they really wanted to go to. I found that my son was very clear on what he wanted. He would work towards that number of points. And after he cashed it out and got what he wanted, he didn't care about it anymore. He would just go back to not caring about the 2 stars every night. Whereas my daughter, my older daughter, she didn't really care what to cash it in for. She didn't ever redeem it. She just every day got those 2 stars, and she kept it, and she got thousands and thousands and thousands, and never cared about cashing them in. Really different. Okay, they're just very different.
And what about the other daughter?
Veronica never got started with this program because she refused to wear pajamas, so she never got stars from the get-go.
Well,
I mean, I
it's really
tried doing it.
You can't extrapolate from that,
No, I cannot. I'm just saying
everything about men and women.
these are just data points, okay?
It's a very good illustration. I think we're all grappling with those same sort of questions, because I also had 2 sons, 1 daughter, and noticed huge differences between them. And also my experience of men and women has been very different. So, yeah.
And I'm with you, Anna. I'm really curious to explore that and to understand it, but not to wipe it away and say there isn't any. Okay, that's the distinction.
I really enjoyed Sam and Anna now. You see, I felt my son was more like a girl, and my daughter, who was born after him, was more fighting like a boy because she was second. So maybe we should look if you are born as the first child or the second or third child. And so I observe very carefully how my grandchildren are born and how they are raised up. So I really like very much the last part. So we should tell some granny stories one day.
I'm really curious about which of these, because I'm with Sam in this, that there are fundamental differences between men and women based on my life experience. But what I'm curious about, what of those are a product of, how we've been raised. And that feels for me like the really useful thing to try and identify what patterns have we, and do we still put on girls and boys to be certain ways? What is it that we're socializing them to become, rather than what is a natural biological? I mean, of course we're products of our society, it's not just biological, but I mean, I've seen young kids, boys or girls, who act very, in a way that really sometimes makes you question how, when you look at them when they're very young, when they feel much more uninfluenced by these ideas of how girls and boys should be. And then when you look at them when they're teenagers, and it's almost painful to see it because they're doing it to such extremes. And you can see the damage it can cause them, because they're trying so hard to fit what they think is expected of them. I'm not sure that we fully understand quite how deep those expectations go. It's like we're born, and then someone puts on a pair of glasses and kind of tells us this is how boys are, this is how girls are. So fit in this if you want to be accepted.
Yes. Sorry, I was excited about that. It's about belonging. Sorry, what you just said triggered that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way of describing it. And I think there's such a huge influence for all of us, isn't it, that we we want to feel loved and we want to feel safety and that we belong. And we'll do anything to fit with that. We'll even hang on to, like, coming back to the political correctness thing, we'll even hang on to these things because we think that our acceptance in a certain community depends on that. It's hard to see it, I think, at times.
There was an experiment done, apparently, dressing up girls in blue costume. This is babies, and boys in pink, and then sort of giving them to different people, and the difference in the way that they related to those that they thought were boys and those that they thought were girls was very marked, even right from, infancy.
Been researched that boys get touched far less than girls by their parents.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's okay for women to hug, but it's sort of much less okay for men to hug.
In certain cultures.
Certain cultures, yeah.
And that has become worse because last generation, there was this, has been influenced by the fear of being seen as gay, and that's so. You see, for the early photographs, they see men hanging on each other's shoulders and on each other's lap. You can't do this anymore as a boy. And among men, there's a lot of pain and loneliness around this.
I just thought I'd tell a little story. When I was in 3rd grade, I was in Baltimore, Maryland.
Can't hear you.
When I was in 2nd and 3rd grade, our family had just moved to Baltimore, Maryland. So 3rd grade, that must have been, I was about, 7, 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. And I remember, obviously I was very new to the US. My English was still not very good. Obviously I was in a new school, so I didn't know anyone. And I forget when it was that a girl named Colleen Sheridan invited me over to her house to play. And I thought nothing of it because this is the very first time it happened. It didn't matter that she was a boy or a girl. It was just the very first time anybody had invited me over to play. So I thought, great, that'd be great. My parents said, go do it. So what she wanted to do was push her doll around in a baby stroller on the sidewalk around the neighborhood. So I did that. I didn't know any better. I didn't know political correctness. So we did this. And then the very next day in school, I was teased like you wouldn't believe by all the boys. Oh, you're playing, parents, you're playing baby, you're playing all this. And, I thought, wow, this is strange because I was just feeling happy that somebody had just invited me over to spend some time with me. And it was only later I had to learn that that was, quote unquote, in this society, shame-inducing or shame-giving on the part of the other boys. So it's a mix of not being aware enough to even take it as an insult, to enjoy being asked over for a play date, and then not really understanding the quote unquote social consequences or implications of it. That's what came to mind when we were talking about this right now. I just thought I'd share that.
So I think a lot of that sort of attitude comes from what we think of as masculine. you know, that boys need to be masculine, and masculine has certain qualities attached to it, like toughness, playing with cars, guns, not being sissy.
Can I add throw two of my personal stories into the conversation as an example? Let me start with the children I helped raising. I was in co-housing with two pairs, and we together we had four adults. We raised for 2 years 3 children. That was great. And there was just in this time, feminism was the way to behave. So we decided to give them a gender neutral upbringing. Well, that was so interesting to see. So all children got a doll, and they all got a car to play with, and so. And, well, that didn't work at all. And I got like my daughter got this computer game, The Sims. Maybe you all know that. So you can simulate building a house and building a society. But once she found out there was a cheat that she could buy as many stuff that she wants, she just only used it to decorate stuff all the time on houses. And so they all fitted the cliches, so to speak, without us making that happen. And you can't say it was from the upbringing from the outside world, because at that time that hardly didn't count. Just to illustrate it briefly, we had a next boy neighbor, a little boy that came to play, and only later Rosa, my daughter, was very surprised to find out they called him Black because he was colored, and she never noticed. So those distinctions that I try to illustrate, they come from the boys themselves. For another example, Rosa had her birthday, like becoming 5 or something, 4 or 5, younger, I think, 4 or something. And she also was allowed to invite boys from her class. And we were used to mainly those 2 girls playing together with us, all the toys and those little kind of pink stuff. Don't use the cliche. So, and then those boys, they came stumbling in like they threw a whole bucket of tennis balls into the room, and all over the place. So that was just their nature expressing themselves. So that's the first one. And the second one, what this does to how men are kind of pushed into this role of being strong and resilient, is when at 16 I saw part of a film. There was fiction, but it was based on facts. It's called the Bridge, and Heiner might still be listening. Die Brücke, and was about at the end of the World War II. There were all adults were basically already killed by the enemy, so they sent all the young kids to the front to defend the last bridges when the enemy entered. And it was about those young kids still being kids, forced to act like a male and making those life and death decisions and being a killing machine instead of just the scared boys they were. And I was around that age myself, and I remember not much of the story, but I remember going to sleep being totally torn apart by the pains and the ways, the inability also in my own family to kind of express that boys could cry and should be protected against all the pain that is put upon them because they need to defend. And also knowing very well that when there is a war, I am the one who will be fighting and not my sister. So it not only culture works like that, nature as well. So I still struggle with that. So these are my two little stories.
Harry,
Actually,
thank you. Harry,
Sorry.
thank you very much for getting very personal. I was just thinking about how it was in my life. You see, the generation of my father, only 1% survived. We, in my age, were only brought up by women. And I understood, and I have a trembling voice now, that this is different than it was 10 or 15 years later. And I have seen it also with men which were 5 or 10 years older than me, which were raised somehow without any fathers. So they raised in a more, I cannot speak about myself, but maybe more in a sensible mode. And so I'm very sensitive to all these gender discussions. So coming back to Tammy, I think it was not a discussion that now the boys may speak because the girls were speaking all the time. It is a general capacity to listen and have compassion. Excuse me, I was not really here all the time, but I think it is very important what we are saying here.
Thank you, Heiner. Thank you so much. Yeah. So the whole German generation got eradicated, all men. Yeah. This is one of those things that make me want to find a better solution so dearly. We could do better than that. We should. We are at risk once more, and we all know that.
I was just going to say that war has changed, and not saying it's better, but it's less dependent on men fighting in the battlefield. And the fact that it's much more technological, it has the possibility to be more equal anyway.
Yeah, more equal war? What are you suggesting, Anna?
Because you were saying that you knew that you would have to go and fight and your sister wouldn't. So I'm saying, you know, it's one of those things that is open to both sexes now, both genders.
Yes.
But the loss of those human beings is still as impactful, no matter what gender.
Yeah, of course.
And so mm-hmm.
We just had this big Republican meeting where this women before boy was speaking out because she was whistleblowing. What is her name? And now she is a female. She was speaking so sober
Chelsea
and
Manning.
so clear.
Manning.
Can you hear me?
Chelsea Manning.
Yes, Jesse. I was so impressed by her. I don't have the names, but the energies. she really told our young boys and girls who applauded her and told her to make your life come to order and not to intervene somewhere else, but really put your life on tracks. So this Chelsea, or whatever her first name is now, left a deep, deep impression on me, and the courage to be a whistleblower. So whistleblowing is one of the central issues I'm involved with since maybe 20 years, organizing such whistleblowing conferences, not really speaking of myself enough. And that's my sincere pity.
Yeah. Okay. In my own, hey Alex. Welcome, Alex. Rise up so we can see you. Hi. Okay, allow me continue the conversation. In my personal quest to find the way forward for myself and as a way that hopefully is also helpful to others, is that I'm at the point is all these huge solutions that would fit everybody don't fit me, and I just am at this moment really trying indeed to get myself in order, my life in order, healing the parts in me that need healing, and these are quite a few, as you can understand, as a result of the conversations here. And with that, I might become of value to the larger process. But I also am, meanwhile, by doing that, becoming convinced that the personal work is the most universal work. And growing myself is the best contribution I can have. And then I can be hopefully present if somebody else needs me, or I need to maintain what's positive and not letting be blown away by anything that happens, because I myself am so vulnerable and in need of, well, about everything. And the thing I am investing these days is in making connections and own those connections, take responsibility for them, and not just connecting on the mental level, discussing about stuff, but also going into it and embody that and live it. And that's basically the work where my focus is. And it seems to be somewhat egocentrical, but it's not that intent. It's the intent to be whole. And whole does include everything, right? Over.
I'm sorry I came in late. I was looking on the wrong link.
You're welcome anyway, Alex.
It's about 4 a.m. your time, isn't it, Alex?
I completely second what you're saying, Harry. For me, personal work is the first priority. It's the first step, really, to becoming whole. And without being whole, everything will come from a divided place. And it feels like it wouldn't be of value anyway. And for me, it doesn't feel egotistical. It feels really important, top priority. Yeah, to see that.
I really do agree, but I wanted to make a small little suggestion, not to think of it as step one. I don't think anyone actually thinks about self-work as step one. To recognize the need for any of that only comes when we try to interact with others and things go off the rails. So to me, it's in parallel. That you're doing these connections, you're seeing what goes right and what goes wrong. You realize that, hey, it's always that person's fault initially. But then over time, no, it really isn't. And then there's kind of this parallel effort to work on the interaction as well as the self. At least for me, that's the way it worked.
You see, for me, was this leapfrogging from the I and being whole and safe and compassionate to going to the we, the you, the they, and the other is a problem. You see, our German national culture was a we culture. They were fighting for the nation and forgot themselves and forgot the other nations. And now I observe that there are strong movements from going from the IQ to the we Q again, and we have no compassion for the other Q, for the compassionate thing, because we are not living on an island or in a valley anymore. So we are facing here extreme challenges, because somehow the problem spaces are exploding and our mindset is still in our sweet isolation. So I think what we are doing here is a basic step for that, expanding the solutions, the shared spaces beyond the I, we, you, they, and others. So thank you for being there, and thank you that I could not be always with you, but I found this session here very basic. It had some ways to go to the central of emotion and compassion, but I love to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Heiner.
So over these last months, I've been really pretty profoundly impacted by individual connections with people. And Sam and Anna, I kind of was doing weekly sessions, really deepening our connection. And part of this for me is to really show up as a full human and be and it was uncomfortable places inside of myself in connection. And over the last few weeks, I've really deepened my connection with Harry, and we have a bit of a love experiment happening. And really going into those places where I'm blocked and it's hard to speak of, and being vulnerable and seeing, what is between that? Why is that? Why can't we just say? There's so many things that are difficult to say. Like, my hands are sweating right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I really show up as my full self in social spaces? And so it's very curious, like experimenting with presence and what I can actually hold and feel and speak at the same time. And I think a lot of that is social conditioning and the ability to push beyond. Sam and I have also gone really deep and pushed beyond what would be acceptable, and I guess just to put this frame around it, I was thinking about this coming into this conversation, is because I approached both Sam and Harry very personally, and if a man did that, it would be very different. Like, it would not be allowed. So this, I'm coming into my empowerment and, sharing some pretty deep transformations and feelings inside myself. And I feel like I'm allowed, and I'm taking that space and I'm owning that space. But my deep considerations around, if a man did that, whoa, like, that's really interesting to consider. And I also want to just touch on Anna, our relationship. And, we've been meeting weekly for 6-7 months. And the depth of love that's there, like, it's so beautiful. I remember this moment where Anna just so beautifully, naturally said to me, "I love you, Tammy." And it was this, like, there's this moment of true human connection where, like, there's an ocean between us, but she was right with me.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Tammy. It's lovely.
Yeah, to dare to love or to be unconditionally present. That's what we need to learn, and that's so vulnerable, so dangerous, and so often, abused. And it needs so much courage to kind of be vulnerable, and it's a strength. It's extremely powerful.
And if there was rock solid certainty and understanding that everyone who heard you and sensed your presence will love you no matter how you showed up or what you said or what you shared, would that be different? Is that what we're trying to create? Is that what we're trying to model? Is that the world we're trying to live in?
A safe world, yes. Where I can be who I am.
Well, my feeling is that is something that I can't depend on other people to do it. That I have to establish that for me, in myself. And it means often feeling alone and isolated. And different people do it in different ways, I guess. Just because I do it in what I feel is a sort of I mean, obviously other people come into it, but what I'm saying is that I feel I can't depend, and it just could be because of early situations that I've been involved in. I don't know, but my feeling is this is between me and me. Over.
It's just becoming interesting. What could you say a little more, Anna?
Yes, when what you spoke about as work on yourself, this is what I call work on myself, really. That this I need to experience being in the present, whole. When that happens, I feel safe. So that's the work that I do for me. And I don't think anybody else can do it for me or can give me that sort of, you know, feedback or response to make me feel safe. I need to feel safe to be me. And it takes courage and it feels difficult and lonely sometimes. Yeah, I also believe that the world, that the cosmos, that the whole, that life is giving me the opportunity to discover myself in that way. That everything, I don't always see it that way, but that everything really is a gift to me to help me on this journey. And that also, when I can do that, that is the way that I can be the most use to other people. Because I believe everybody's really on the same journey.
If I may ask a personal question, Anna, at what point did you come to this understanding or realization?
Just now. I mean, I don't know. When no, it's sort of been around, I guess, but yeah, I don't have a sense of the way that I developed, or, you know, maybe I just don't have a good memory. I don't know.
I like what you said. I really do. I think that in my mind, my sense of being, I would like to achieve that. You know, I've been involved in various different styles of martial arts. And one of the things I'd like to share from Tai Chi is the reason we do self exercises, what they call forms, and also the reason we do two-person exercises called push hands or sparring. And that is that from my instructor, he said, when you do the forms, you understand how you're connected, how you're constructed, how you move, how you're balanced, where your center is. So you understand yourself. When you do the two-person exercises, you understand the other, the opponent, your partner, their center of balance, their force, their intention, etc. And the way he phrased the understanding, and the reason you do both is when you understand yourself and the other, then fear goes away. And when you have no fear, then you're able to engage in whatever it is in a relaxed, authentic way. And that to me is the real practice of martial arts. And I think you're getting there. So I applaud that.
I think we are going here on a very interesting tangent to include the me and the you and the they, and to really step out of the hamster wheel. And I had the chance to meet some Zen and Tao masters, and this all comes to this tradition of meditation, that you are present and take yourself out. And Anna and you, me, where we are struggling with, to really have a solid base to make the next step, to include others, to think out of the box beyond space and time, and be inclusive. So what I mentioned in some other talks here was this longitudinal experiments with Tanya Singer over 1 year with 200 people in meditation, doing an inclusive part, which was called the perspective unit, where you play with positionalities and perspectivities and framings. And the results were really outstanding. I know we cannot go here deeper, but I find it very, very intriguing how we come from the individual to the gender, to this very broad approach of having universal compassion. I don't know if this is a good word in English, but to really try a synthetic compassion or globalism. I have no words. But what this experiments with Tanya Singer showed, people really move across when they take their viewpoint out and include various perspectives of what we call eyes. You called me. I'm about to be away, but I'm happy to be with you.
Oh, that's just not fair.
Wow,
Just
who's
No,
that?
not
Is that a new one? Did they have puppies?
This is one of my 14 new little puppies I've had in the last month and a half.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
My two girls had 2 litters, 1 6, 1 8. And this is, she's about 4.5 weeks now.
I'm not allowed.
Is that the
Sorry.
second? Is that the second litter, Sam? Sorry to interrupt, Alex.
Well, this is one from the first litter. They were born on May 13th.
How are you managing that? 2 litters?
Well, I'm not allowed to have a dog in this. I live in a government complex, but I'm allowed to have a cat. So I don't know what kind of cat I should get.
Anyone that comes to you.
Yeah. That puppy's about twice as big as it was a week ago. That's rapid cell division. It's called exponential cell growth.
Anyway, sorry for the distraction. I just wanted to share part of my world here today.
Anna was talking about confronting the inner demon of self-awareness. And it reminded me of some of the things I've heard over the years from people in our self-help groups. Some of the older members who call it the College of Knowledge or the Clinic of Calm, because they learn how to do this inner journey through trial and error and through repeated concentration and meditation. And it's amazing. Some of the things that I hear are so simple and inspiring. It's just incredible. The old lady that I looked after used to say to me, Alex, it's simple. All you have to do is think loving thoughts, and everything else will take care of itself.
Thanks. Great.
I think one of the things to remember is that you never really arrive. You know, you're always on the way, and it's the journey that is enjoyable rather than the destination, although we always have a destination in mind. But the reason I say that is because every now and again I fall back into feeling lost and really depressed and empty, and you know, it's just so easy to feel like this shouldn't be happening. I've done all this, you know, why is it happening again? And yeah, it's good to remember that that's going to happen all the time. Yeah.
I'm happy I learned from the concept of computer games. It's the same game, it's just the next level.
Yeah.
It's difficult to climb out of a hole when you haven't got a shovel. When you find yourself depressed and really in that dark place, you need to look in the toolbox. And when I did that, I found the toolbox was empty. There was nothing available to get out of this hole. And I had to sit there in maddening depression until eventually it became so overwhelming, I just had to say, all right, I'll call out for help. And I looked up, I saw this hole above me and some light shining in. And I thought, oh, maybe there's some help up there. So I looked towards the light. And next thing, I heard this noise and it was a plop, and the ladders landed beside me. So that was great. Somebody discovered me in the hole and threw a ladder in. And that help wouldn't have come if I hadn't have asked for it.
Just thinking about what I said about levels and what you just said, Alex, about tools. And it feels like for me, I get more tools the more levels I pass through. And I wonder that that's where we need to look a little bit for making changes in the world, is giving people these tools. Because we don't do that in education. We don't support that in many ways with how we take care of each other in society. But I have this faith that the process we're talking about now is something fundamental to all of us. We're all on the same journey. But some people never see that light. They never get that help. They never get that first tool. Sometimes if you have 2 or 3 tools, then it's a lot easier to get tools 4 and 5. And the more people we can raise up to be playing, you know, on a higher level, the more successful I think we'll be in taking care of each other and our environment and having a better future.
It takes a village.
And we grow in reflection with each other, right? Like we have to see each other and take those chances to be vulnerable and share what we're learning, and not as like the presentation style of like, this is what I know, but rather this is my experience, and how does it feel sitting next to other people's experience?
Ideally over bread and beverage as well.
Sorry, Sam, can't hear you.
I said ideally by breaking bread and sharing beverage as well.
Sam wants to bring us all together.
July 2nd or August 2nd or September 2nd or whatever weekend, let's just say, let's meet in Berlin, or let's meet in London, or let's meet in Vancouver, let's meet in Seattle. Just pick a day. Actually, what about this? September 30th, that's the anniversary of the GCC submission. That gives us everybody enough time to get some plane tickets, right? I'll bake some bread.
I think September is when they have the America's Cup race in Auckland.
Well, then good time to rent your place out for, thousands and thousands. And escape. Anyway, floating the idea so that sooner or later somebody will take it up and we'll set a date and we'll set a place and we'll all get tickets and we'll all show up and we'll all share some beverage and bread.
I just wanted to come back to the tools. I've done quite a few different things in my life to try to find tools. Starting off with psychoanalysis and different therapies, and then going through different spiritual journeys. And for me, they've really all come back to staying with yourself. At that point when it's really hard to be with yourself, to just stay there and know that actually you do have all the answers within you, and that you will come through.
If I may add to that, I am learning this is enormously stronger when you can do this being witnessed and in the presence of somebody else who holds space for you in that. That you do not need to do that alone. You do it for yourself, you do it on your own. But having somebody being there for you while you do it, it's extremely powerful. Mm. That's basically what Tammy and I are doing. Going to those places I never shared, I never dared to look at it myself, let alone having it seen by somebody else, let alone this somebody being of the other gender. I don't have actual names for that, but I call her a woman now. And I'm noticing that feels politically incorrect in this conversation.
Not for me.
Well, you know, I've heard some stories here.
You learn a great deal about gender identity when you reach your 50s and 60s.
Yes, but I wish I knew before.
What do you mean, Alex?
It's an easy lesson that comes from childhood, but it's confused by environmental conditioning, and to a certain extent, we inherit in our genes, and we genetic inherit the culture of the society we were brought up in. But getting back to the mirror, when you're a child, you look in the mirror, and that establishes your identity physically, biologically, and manifestly, naturally, and what nature provided. Then you grow up, then you start growing up, and things happen. Things change. Your thoughts get molded by your likes and dislikes. You might like boys, you might like girls. Your sexual identity develops along with your surroundings and your environment. I think it's environmentally conditioning. But, you know, there are others who differ in their opinion. I haven't looked into it. It's just part of life. It's a strange phenomena. So
You said something happens when you're in your 50s and 60s, which...
yes. Yes. I changed my opinion on gender identity from one of taking a fixed position viewpoint to one of having a more universal approach. It's a rainbow. There's panism, and there's about 8 different kinds of sexual identity. Pantheism, it's one of them covers the whole lot. But it's just a matter of degree. It's 50 shades of grey. And turquoise. And aquamarine. I love artists who play with colour. So I was attracted to that rainbow. Variety is the spice of life, after all. If you are going to have an encounter with another human being, their gender identity shouldn't enter the equation. You either like them or you don't. You're either attracted or you're not. But I wasn't confused about my identity. I just wanted to make that clear. All I had to do was look in the mirror, and that job completed. I knew I was a boy, and I still know I'm a boy. Well, a man used to be a boy. Used to be, well, you know, I was never a girl. Unless I was in a play at school. I was on stage at school once in a play, and I sang to the school on the stage twice. Got away with it the first time. They let me do it again. So, but I'm not an egotistical flaunter. I don't want to put my ego on the stage and dance around like a what do you call it? Flinging around. I'd rather be in the background playing the drums. You know, I'm the member of the band. I've always been attracted to entertainment and music. Music's the greatest inspiring part of my life. Music is art. What more can you ask for? Poetry and culture. these things keep me occupied when I'm lonely. When you reach my age, you're faced with this living alone. I've lived with people all my life and really enjoyed having people around. So when you're faced with the environment where you've got no one around to talk to and interrelate with, you come up with ideas and ways to overcome it, and things to keep your interest involved in things. There's so much variety. It's just, it's difficult to focus if you're not concentrating, meditating and focusing. It becomes easier to focus if you've got this ability to connect with your own heart, and that gives you, in your heart is buried all the answers you need. Well, in my case, I found that to be true. The ego can't interfere when your heart takes over your thought process. It shuts the ego down and says, now you sit in the corner and behave. And with that, I'm complete.
You muted yourself, Harry.
Okay, the wrong way around. I'm noticing we're, I think, 2.5 hours into the conversation, and have not yet solved the problem. Must be not smart enough. But I'm also becoming hungry. That's more practical.
Yeah,
my body needs to take over these ones. So if I would ask permission to be excused.
I need to leave as well. Thank you, everybody, for
Me
a
too.
lovely.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, amazing conversation. Thank you.
Great to hang out with you all.
I want to don't forget the replay.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.